Hello to all of you Foxborough faithful, and thank you for joining us today here on Patriots No Huddle. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm Mike Debate, joined as always by Derek Havens and Steve Balistrieri, and we have a special treat for you today, friends. One of the best in the business, and I kid you not. I used to refer to this gentleman as a rising star. Well, he's risen beyond any type of expectations we may have had for him into being not only one of the best pro analysts out there, but also one of the best college analysts. You know his great work from 98.5 The Sports Hub, as well as on the Catch 22 podcast with our good friend Evan Lazar. It is my honor to welcome to Patriots No Huddle today, the great Alex Barth. Alex, welcome to Patriots No Huddle, and thanks so much for taking time out to join us today.
Yeah, that's quite the intro. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you guys having me.
He rehearsed it in the shower a few times today.
Absolutely. You know what? It's just like coming back into and like, putting on an old glove or an old shoe. It just comes right back to you. And believe me, I mean, it all comes from a place of sincerity. That's why it comes so easy. Alex and Evan used to say that I was the best hype man in the business, and I don't know. Derek might be a close second here, but it's good to have you on the show today, bud, and always an honor to absorb your wisdom and counsel.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Jumping right into it, Alex. I mean, now obviously, let's just start with the draft. I know that a lot of people have heard your some of your takes on 98.5 or Patriots Catch 22, which is a great podcast, and I've mentioned it multiple times on the show before. A great listen. What was your overall take from the draft? I thought that they had a pretty good haul.
Yeah, I think I had two really big picture takeaways from this draft. One, they needed to do what was best for Drake May. That needed to be a priority. Last time they had a young quarterback have a promising rookie season. Look, would things have necessarily ended on a high note in that situation? I don't think so. But still, you look at the investments they made in the offense during the Mac Jones era. It was trading for Devontae Parker, drafting Cole Strange in the first round, and Tyquan Thornton in the second. That's like it for notable additions in that 3-year or 2.5-year window. They had some before they drafted him, but we don't need to relitigate Mac Jones. But the point being, this is a team that, even going back to the end of the Brady era, really had not invested around the quarterback. And they certainly did that. All of their top 100 picks playing on the offensive side of the ball. They go out and they get a left tackle that they desperately needed. They get a wide receiver with some speed who can create after the catch, which will help Drake May. I thought what they did at the, what's best for Drake May at this point is what's best for the football team. And I think some people will hear that, they did what's best for Drake May and be like, oh, great. Why are they catering to him? Why aren't they just building a team? This is building a team in the modern NFL. You cater to the quarterback. It's not people act like it's a bad thing to have to cater to your quarterback. It's what all the best teams do. No team, whether it be the players they bring in, whether it be the scheme, whatever, no team caters to their quarterback more than Lamar Jackson. And that's working out okay. They took a guy with a great skill set and they've elevated him that much further. So that was take one. Take two, just on the draft strategy itself, I think they did a really good job. The big debate, if you take the players out of it, the football philosophy, the roster philosophy debate around the Patriots leading into this draft was best player available versus drafting for need. And how much do you weigh premium positions in that conversation? That's essentially what Will Campbell versus Ashton Genty boiled down to, and even Will Campbell versus Armand Membu to an extent. Mm-hmm. What did they do? I thought they walked that line perfectly. Top of the draft, they got, maybe not the best player, because I think Ashton Genty will have the best Madden rating, but when you factor in premium position and position need of all that, they made the best pick in Will Campbell, who I think is a very good player. And then they come back later and they go pure best player available with their next pick in Travion Henderson. So I thought, and they kind of did that throughout the rest of the draft, hit on some needs on day 2 after taking Henderson. I think with Swinson and Farmer, not that they didn't need to, improve their defensive front, but that just felt like those guys were the best players left at the point where the Patriots took them. Kind of felt like no-brainers there. So I like how they kind of worked that balance. I thought they did a very good job of that.
No, I 100% agree with that. And I would say, I was talking about Travion Henderson for a little while because again, I had watched him a few times, and I was just like, this guy is just tailor made for Josh McDaniels' offense. He can be explosive. Were you at the Senior Bowl?
I was not.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was, the only reason I was asking that is because Kyle Williams really showed out there, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts on Kyle Williams, because I'm interested to see what your vision for Kyle Williams is in this offense.
So it's a funny story. So I'm getting ready for the Senior Bowl. I'm doing my research and I'm kind of going through all the players and getting familiar. And I start watching Kyle Williams, who I was like aware of from his time at Washington State, but late games on the CW. I didn't watch a ton of them this year.
Sure.
And so I start watching and I'm looking up his numbers and stuff. And I'm like, wow, okay. Like this is impressive. Why aren't more people talking about this guy? And so this is what you do, right? You go and you look, what are other people saying, kind of see if you're on the right track or not. And nobody else is really talking about him. He wasn't in any Senior Bowl previews. The consensus board had him at like pick 800. And, the consensus board is it doesn't reflect the internal view of the teams, but like externally. So I'm texting people. I'm like, what's going on? This guy looks like a day 2 pick. And nobody, like, they were just like, I don't know who he is. We get to the Senior Bowl. And so I wasn't there. I had to cover it off, watching on ESPN. Every time Kyle Williams is up for a rep, they're cutting the commercial. Like I'd see him step up and I'm like, is this guy just a fever dream? Does he exist? And it turns out he very much exists and he's a very good player. I like that they got him because the big thing, and I wrote about this after the pick on 98.5thesportshub.com. I asked Kyle Williams draft night, like what changed to have that breakout year in 2024. And he talked about a focus in improving his ability after the catch. And the numbers bear that out. He went from an average after the catch receiver to one of the best in the country last year, like top 5 in the country after the catch. The Patriots were one of the worst yards after the catch teams in football last year, especially the wide receivers who averaged just 4 yards per reception after the catch, which is not good enough. So to get a guy that can do that, to get a guy that can play multiple positions, I think will help. I would use him more as a Z slot. I think they see him maybe as more of an X, and they're going to put him out there, and that's going to allow them to get him, Pop Douglas, and Stephon Diggs once he's healthy, all on the field at the same time. My guess is they'll move him around. I think he's primarily going to play the X, but you draft a guy like that. A lot of people wondered, why did they draft him over Jaylin Noel? And it's a fair question. I had the two graded similarly. I thought Noel was maybe a better fit for that McDaniels slot.
I thought so too.
Like truly the slot role, if that's what they want. So this pick tells me, okay, they didn't just want a slot receiver. Maybe they see Pop there. Maybe they see Diggs there, whatever. Or maybe McDaniels is going to do something different. So if the plan was to just play him in the slot, I think they would have gone Noel. But if you value that versatility, which they can certainly use, he can be a mismatch weapon. So I think they're going to move him all over the place. We're going to see him in different roles.
I just want to say this one thing, and then I'll kick it over to Mike or Steve, and because I was saying this to Evan the other day, I view Kyle Williams, and I wonder, or the way I see their picture for him, is maybe in that KB role, and I wonder if that makes him expendable. Vrabel has been doing a lot of work, obviously, on flipping the roster and kind of working some guys out. And that receiver room now is a little crowded. Maybe it's not as top heavy as we want it to be, but I see Kyle Williams as a guy who can play inside outside. Do you see anything with that?
Yeah, it's similar. I think he has more outside experience than Bourne does. My thing with Bourne when it comes to roster is how much say does Josh McDaniels have? Because obviously Josh McDaniels had a ton of success with him in 2021. And look, some of this it hinges on him being explosive and coming back from that knee injury and just, where is he at physically? And if he's not there physically, they'll move on. But, if McDaniels thinks they can kind of tap into what they tapped into in 2021, when he was on 1,000-yard pace before he got COVID, people forget that. He was going to be a 1,000-yard receiver that year. When you have in that room, Mac Hollins, Pop Douglas, Kyle Williams, those 3 guys are going to make the team. It sounds like Stephon Diggs might be ready for week 1, just based on some stuff Mike Reese has said. So that's the kind of thing I'll believe it when I see it. But okay, Stephon Diggs is 4. That 5th spot it's Bourne, Baker, and Polk, really. And then we can throw guys like Efton Chisholm in there, but it's Bourne, Baker, and Polk. I don't believe I'm forgetting anybody for that last spot. McDaniels has worked with one of them. He's had success with one of them. So does Bourne end up does he have the inside track if his knee is healthy? on getting that last spot, I think there's a chance that he does. And then maybe they carry 6, or if, Diggs opens the season on PUP, that obviously opens another spot. But the no fear in turning over the roster thing, to me, is more of a warning sign for last year's rookies. Because those, especially Polk, a second-round pick a year later, you traditionally that guy gets at least 2 years. You're not giving that guy that short of a leash. The way Mike Vrabel is kind of torn through this roster this year, I don't know if that's the case in this specific situation.
Yeah, no, I get that. Steve, what do you got?
Yeah, Alex, thanks again for joining us. And my question is, offensively, we've been just talking about the wide receivers, but overall, do you think they did enough to change this team from, the issues that we saw all the past couple of years into a major league, if you will, offense where, they can come from behind in these one-score games and pull out some victories this year?
That's going to depend on the draft picks, especially Kyle Williams. Like I'm confident in Will Campbell. And look, I like Kyle Williams. This is coming across, I think, as me knocking the guy I do, but like I would have liked to see them, and they could have done both. I would like to see him being on a guy like DK Metcalf. I think that's the guy that's really going to add that dynamic element to your offense that you're not getting anywhere else. Are they going to be top 10 offense this year? I mean, Drake May would have to take a pretty sizable jump. All those rookies have to hit at all of them. Kyle Williams, Travion Henderson, Jared Wilson. I don't know about that. Can they be top 20? Flirt with top half of the league? Yeah, I think they can do that. They're certainly on the right track. I don't know that they're there. They didn't do everything they needed to do. They checked a handful of major boxes, though. And I think they got back, if I'm understanding your question correctly, like they're back at a baseline. They were so below the baseline for what you're looking for offensively from an NFL team the last few years. And that all began with the offensive line. That the offensive line was not good enough. They had multiple players starting on the offensive line who were just not starting caliber NFL players, maybe not NFL caliber players. They're back to that baseline now. They're better at wide receiver. They're still not great, but they're better. They have more speed on offense, which they needed. And Drake May is going to, get a full camp as the starter and have another year under his belt and all of that. And Josh McDaniels, we know what he can do as a play caller. So they're definitely better. They should be able to take a significant leap from last year, but even a significant leap from last year still puts them, to me, middle of the pack at best.
Yeah, and middle of the pack isn't bad for year one, really, with this new regime.
Yeah, especially when you look at a defense that should be top 10.
Yeah, and because what I was thinking is like, even as bad as they were offensively last year, they were still in a lot of football games. There were so many one possession losses that you're thinking a touchdown here or there, and their record wasn't really that bad, and I like a lot of the moves that they've made this year, and I was just curious how you felt about that. I mean, I don't expect them to be top 10, offensively, but even if they're in the top half of the league this year, that would be significant. And with the defense on paper looking a lot better, a lot of those one-score games might fall in their favor this year.
I mean, all I know is that point A to B is not always linear, but sometimes in the last couple of years for the Patriots, it's been kind of like all over the place. And I actually feel like you can see the focus and the direction now. Whether that works or not is TBD. But right now, I can actually see a path.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Well, along those lines, I got you. Along those lines, Steve, you mentioned that the close games, like that's its own thing. You've got to show, and Drake May has to show. We saw it briefly in Tennessee, but he has to prove that he can win games late, and he can put him in position to win games late. So that's something they've struggled with going back a few years now, back to the end of the Belichick era, that they obviously have to be better at if they want to flip this thing.
Mike, what do you got?
Well, sorry about the technical issue there.
No, you were good.
Alex, staying on offense for just a moment, because you did mention that defense, and I know my esteemed colleagues will definitely pick your brain when it comes to that. For all of the exciting additions that the Patriots have made this offseason, and we know they've made a lot of them, whether it be free agents or whether it be through the draft, there are guys in that locker room that still, some of them that still have a lot to prove in order to move this team forward. And one guy I keep coming back to and that I keep looking at is Cole Strange at the left guard position. Obviously, Cole came out of Chattanooga with a lot of promise, a lot on his shoulders. A lot of people feel he was a reach in the first round and that he was better suited for second or third. Great upper body strength, fluid movement, has all of the necessary tools to succeed in an outside zone offense. But we know that Josh McDaniels, even though he's not going to abandon that concept, that's not his bread and butter when it comes to calling an offense or assembling an offense. So my question to you is, in a Josh McDaniels type fit, how do you see Cole Strange assimilating into this offensive line? Does he have something to be worried about here this season? Or do you think this is a make or break type year for him where if it doesn't work out, the Patriots chose to move on? I know they didn't pick up his $16.7 million option, which is generally not a good sign, but do you think he has a chance to kind of reverse the fortune here?
Yeah, it's tough to see the path for Cole Strange. It is. You talked about the fit in the McDaniels offense. He generally wants bigger, more mauling guards than those smaller athletic players. So that's City So and Layden Robinson, certainly more so than Cole Strange. We know they worked him at center last year. I thought before they drafted Jared Wilson, he would probably have a chance to compete with Bradbury, but here comes Jared Wilson. So now that's blocked. You know, if Bradbury loses the job, are they going to keep a 6-year veteran around as a backup? Does Cole Strange maybe win the backup center job? I think that might be his best path to the roster right now, but he's in a tough spot. He can play multiple positions and they like the versatility, but he's kind of blocked at both positions, at least as a starter. Maybe he can win a depth role, but to what we talked about before, like Mike Vrabel's not afraid to take a hatchet to this thing. And I think the traditional roster conventions that we use when you talk about, roster projections and things like that, I don't know how many of them apply this year. So no, I think Cole Strange is in a tough spot.
What's your thoughts on there are three players that I'm kind of curious about. You mentioned Farmer and Swinson earlier, which were again, to your point, just tremendous value picks. I mean, those guys both are super intriguing. Farmer, it was just like a no-brainer. As soon as he was on the board when they were up there, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Wilson, I'm kind of curious about because part of me wonders if I'm like, okay, they signed Garrett Bradbury, but maybe Wilson beats him out, or maybe they redshirt him 1 year and then he comes in next year. What are your thoughts on those three guys? I'm kind of curious on that.
So Wilson's somebody I during the season after Andrews got hurt, it was like, this might be it. He's somebody I was talking about. Really smart player, very athletic. The reason he fell was, at least what I think the main reason is, this was a draft full of experienced linemen, guys that were 2, 3, 4-year starters. Wilson only started 1 year at Georgia and really didn't play a lot before that. So, you look at some of the issues when it comes to his technique with his hands and his feet and things like that. Like, they're there. They're not overblown, but a lot of them are just a symptom of this guy hasn't played a lot. Like, he needs to get out there and get the experience. So I think once he does that, the center competition in camp this year, and as it goes through the season, Jared Wilson's going to be the starting center at some point. It's just a matter of how long can Garrett Bradbury hold him off. That's kind of what it comes down to me. So we'll see how quick of a learner he is. The preseason is going to be big for him, but he checks a lot of the boxes in what Josh McDaniels is looking for at center. Farmer's an interesting one. He's kind of a ball of clay. He's not. You look at a guy. Was he 6'4", 6'5", 305, whatever it is, right?
Long arms and
long arm, like explosive athlete. And you look at that guy and you think, okay, pass rusher. Like, you put him in that group with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. Well, he's actually been a run player in college. And his athleticism and his size suggests that he has upside as a pass rusher, but he hasn't done it a ton. So they needed a run stopper. I thought they were going to go with a nose tackle. I think Y.A. Black was drafted around a similar time, was the guy I was looking at for them from Iowa. But okay, so you get a guy that can stop the run that you're going to coach up as a pass rusher. And so there's an interesting dynamic there, a lot more of a ball of clay kind of player than some of the other defensive tackles we were talking about one way or the other going into the draft for the Patriots. And then Swinson, I think, is, kind of similar. Just a guy that as he continues to grow his game, like there's a lot to work with, and he profiles as the kind of rusher where, he's not the biggest guy, he's not necessarily the fastest guy, but he's just, his technique to what he's developed at this point is solid, and he plays with a very high motor. Whether it be Mike Vrabel, whether it be Terrell Williams, like you see what they did with these kind of guys in Tennessee and for Terrell Williams later in Detroit, and they had so much success with guys with that profile. So I would qualify those two more as project players, but you have a defensive front coaching staff that has gotten the most out of project players at those positions in their previous stops. Like I know some people wanted them to take an edge rusher higher and looked at that as a miss, and they certainly had their opportunities to do so. But if there's a position you're going to wait on, edge kind of makes sense because of the success this coaching staff has had in the past. So,
and with the depth of the class in general,
that too.
Steve, what about you? What do you
got? Is there a spot on the roster right now where you would say they still need to add a little bit more to it?
Yeah. So one is quarterback. Josh Dobbs has been a solid backup at times, but when you have a quarterback that likes to run around, look, let me be clear. This is not me saying that they need competition for Drake May. Drake May is future of the franchise, all that. But when you have a quarterback that runs around, you want a little bit more security there in that second spot. And, Josh Dobbs he hasn't stuck anywhere. And can they get somebody who can maybe do a little bit more there? I don't know if they can. I was kind of thinking maybe they draft somebody. Quarterback's one. Wide receiver, obviously, they still could. I don't really know who they would add at this point. The other one's free safety. I think Craig Woodson's going to play back there, and we'll see how that goes, but he's more of a hybrid. And this is, if you followed me leading up to the draft, this is something I've been big on this for a few years. They need that true center fielder free safety, a guy with a ton
I thought they were gonna take Andrew Makuba, but he went higher than he went a little higher than I was expecting. But I mean, I kind of envision that kind of player for the
Andrew Makuba, Billy Bowman, Malachi Starks were still on the board when they took Craig Woodson. Like, I think Woodson's not a bad player for what he does. I just think what he does, unless they're really worried about Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, and where those guys are at physically, then that pick makes a lot more sense. But besides that, I thought getting that real rangy instinct ball hawking free safety, and they had opportunities to do so. It's not just going to give them somebody in that role. It's going to allow guys like Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis to play more aggressive. And it's going to help the pass rush out. So we'll see how Woodson does in that role. I would think that's going to be his role. We'll see where Peppers and Duggar are at. I get that. In Tennessee, Mike Vrabel had, why am I blanking on his name? Kevin Byard in that role. And Byard profiled more as that kind of hybrid, as great as he was on the back end. It's Craig Woodson, Kevin Byard. That's pretty lofty for a fourth round pick. Byard was one of the best safeties in football for a few years there. So we'll see. But that was another spot where I would have liked to see them add a little bit more.
Mike, what do you got, man?
I can't believe it's about 23 minutes into our conversation with Alex, and we haven't talked special teams yet. We haven't talked kickers. We haven't talked long snappers. We haven't talked punters.
Yeah, it's great. I know that Evan would be pissed if we didn't ask Alex about a kicker question.
Well, I'm going to lead us in that direction right now, my friend. Obviously, the New England Patriots are going to have a new look specialist group this year. Punter, they're pretty much set, but likely a new kicker. I know he's going to be competing with John Parker Romo, and I don't mean to lessen his capabilities because John Parker Romo is a capable kicker. I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can do and push each other in camp. Obviously, we definitely will have a new long snapper in Julian Ashby. So, Alex, when you look at the new look specialist group for the New England Patriots, how do you see this shaking out, and what do you expect from impact on this team from day one from both of these guys?
So I think Miami kicker. It's early in the morning. I think Borregales, it's consistency. And that's something that Jeremy Springer preached a lot during his pre-draft press conference, was that he wanted a kicker who's consistent. Borregales was clear in a way the most consistent kicker in this draft. So, not a guy that we saw this last year from both guys in competition, Joey Sly and Chad Ryland, where, they would hit some impressive long kicks, but both were kind of shaky in that like 30 to 49 yard range. I don't think you should see. I'd be worried if we start to see that with Borgalis. There's the question about the cold weather too. We won't get the answer to that until we get the answer to it. But I think consistency, he should win that competition pretty comfortably. As for, I don't remember if you asked the long snapper thing. That's my thoughts on the kicker. I was just instinctively going to go into that. As for Ashby, it's kind of a change in like makeup. So if you remember, Joe Cardona last year after the Bengals game when he forced that fumble, talked about how Jeremy Springer was having him go down the field and make plays, which was different than what he did under Belichick. And under Belichick, the long snapper was an extra protector, wasn't one of the first guys down the field. He'd stay back there and block. What some teams do now, and Jeremy Springer does this, is if you're the long snapper, you're in the middle of the field, and there's nobody directly opposite you, so you get a clean break off the line once you snap it, and you're the one snapping the ball, so you have kind of a little bit of a head start. Okay, you put all that together, that's a guy that you can get right down the field. So you see some teams sacrificing size for speed, because those guys can be assets in coverage. And if you watch Brian Hines from Past Pulpit has some great clips of this on his Twitter. If you watch Julian Ashby in college, he's beating the gunners down the field. So that's more philosophically what I think Jeremy Springer wants his long snapper to do stylistically than the way Joe Cardona played the position. So I think that's part of what led to that. And some of it's just the roster turnover and all of that. But I also think, eventually whenever they moved on from Cardona, you were going to see this stylistic change in how their long snapper was playing. And Ashby, the one knock on him, you look at what people said about him coming out, is he's undersized. I don't think they really care, because he's an elite athlete who can get down the field and has good tackling skills, and they want to use him basically as another coverage player.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and especially when you look at now how modern, special teams units are coming together, it makes an awful lot of sense. So excellent stuff, Alex. I knew you'd be enthralled, and I knew you'd be reinvigorated to start talking some of this stuff as well. And I'm glad that you mentioned Brian, because he does have some great stuff on subjects like this, and definitely should be checked out in addition as well.
Oh, yeah.
Derek?
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. Steve, what do you got?
No, I was going back to you. I thought it was your.
No, I'm just kind of kicking it around. Alex, I feel like there's. I asked Evan a similar question, but I'm curious on your thoughts on it. It seems like the Patriots are, and what Mike Vrabel is doing is really trying to kind of stabilize or kind of steady the ship a bit, there. And I don't think it's a coincidence that almost all the captains, aside from, I think, Peppers last year, have been, removed from the team. And I don't think it's a, vendetta against any of these guys. Like, I don't think he thought like David Andrews was a bad guy, or Jonathan Jones or Dietrich Wise. Like, almost everyone I've ever spoken to who's had the pleasure of meeting them have all said great things. But I think that it was about kind of establishing his own, kind of setting the foundation per se. What is your thoughts on on that whole situation? Because it's not just him bringing his own coaches in, him bringing in Stretch, his own Ernie Adams per se. It's not just about taking his kind of players. It's also about how he's going ahead and handling the current room. I guess there's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's part of building the culture. There's this big concern when Vrabel was hired. I remember a lot of people were like, "Oh, another Belichick guy." Isn't this what they just tried to do with Gerard Mayo, former linebacker who played for Bill, coming in coaching? Is it going to be business as usual, just trying to extend the glory years? No. And that's not to say Vrabel learned nothing from Bill Belichick. Of course he did. He played for him for the majority of his career. But Mike Vrabel had his own independent upbringing as a coach. Yeah, he crossed paths with some New England people, most notably Bill O'Brien in Houston, who he's still close with. But, he was at Ohio State under multiple head coaches there. Tennessee really didn't have a ton of Patriots people on his staff. There are a couple here and there, but didn't have a ton of Patriots people on his staff. And you see it in his philosophies, like the way that they're building the team is very different. Joshua Farmer doesn't mean he's not a good player, but Joshua Farmer never would have been drafted by Bill Belichick. Like the
No
complete
way.
opposite of a Bill Belichick defensive lineman, because that was, two gap and hold your own, and we're going to open up opportunities for the linebackers to make plays. No, Mike Vrabel wants his defensive linemen to be the playmakers. So, that's just one example. And I think it's just this overall, hey, it's my show now. I'm going to run it the way I want it done. And, you look at some of the guys, I mean, Dietrich Wise and Jonathan Jones were free agents, right? So those were easier. David Andrews was coming off that injury. I don't think they wanted to, whether it's right or wrong, I think what the thought process is if David Andrews is here, he's going to get all the starting reps. And if you get 2 months in a camp and it's last week in August and suddenly you realize his shoulder's not going to hold up, well, now you have your second year quarterback going into week 1 with a center he hasn't really worked with. So, just getting kind of the assurance there. Some of the other ones, Juwan Bentley, I think probably could have played in this system. That one stood out more. But I think it's just all about resetting that culture and Vrabel being Vrabel more than anything else.
Absolutely. Steve, Mike, any other questions you want to ask Alex before we let him go?
Steve, you got anything for our good friend here?
I think he's frozen. He might be frozen.
He looks like he's frozen. Alex, really quickly before we let you go, thank you for your time today, bud. We always appreciate it, and always a wealth of knowledge. Yesterday, Julian Edelman became the 37th inductee into the Patriots Hall of Fame, obviously winning the fan vote, and I don't think anybody's questioning whether or not he deserves a spot in that Hall of Fame for everything that he's done on the field. Your thoughts on Julian getting inducted, and who might be the 38th next year as you look into your Barthian crystal ball and try to make a prediction as to who may be the next one to get his red jacket?
It better be Adam.
No, I was going to say, obviously a tremendous Patriot. It's tough because you had two guys who deserve to be first ballot.
Yeah.
In both Julian Edelman and Adam Vinatieri. And look, when the voting's online, the demographic's going to skew younger and they have more memories. The younger generation is more memories of Julian Edelman than maybe Adam Vinatieri, who's just some kicker they hear stories about who they remember on the Colts. So that probably didn't help Vinatieri. But Edelman certainly deserves to be in. Not just a great player, but specifically a guy that played his best in the big moments. Right. And I wrote about that on 985thesportshub.com. People can check that out. But a guy that came up, all 3 Super Bowl runs, there are headline Julian Edelman moments. If we're going to talk about like his best moments with the Patriots, we're going to talk about the catch and the hit he took from Cam Chancellor in 49. We're going to talk about the fingertips catch in 51. We're going to talk about the double pass against the Ravens. That's 3 things. And I haven't even gotten to a Super Bowl MVP yet. Like that's the kind of big game player this guy was. So deserves to be in. Happy for him. Looking forward to it. And that theory about, it's mostly kids voting and how does that impact things? We'll see next year because I think Rob Gronkowski's eligible. So if you assume they keep the other 2 on the ballot, all right, well, now it's Vinatieri versus Gronkowski. And, it's going to be kind of that same thing. So Vinatieri will get in eventually, better get in eventually.
I say this all the time. I say this all the time. Well, I only covered the team for a few years. And my favorite moment was them. I watched, I was at the training camp practice when they were rehearsing the double pass. And then you see it in like that game down 14 to Baltimore, which was always just like a pesky, team, a team that they always had like a great rivalry with, down 14 twice. And they pull it out in the biggest game. I think that was my favorite moment, watching Edelman sling it to Danny in training camp sometime in July, and like probably 2014. So that to me was like the height of my covering the team. That was such a cool moment to see him execute it in like such a big game situation. But you're right, Edelman came up with all these clutch moments. I think that hit from Cam Chancellor and the way he ran, obviously extremely concussed, no question. Certainly kind of underrated. It just showed Edelman's toughness in big game moments.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, Alex, apparently we lost Steve. I'm not sure what happened, but internet, that's how things go. Alex, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you hopping on the show. It was fun chopping up with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Of course, man. All right. I want to thank everyone who was listening to this edition of Patriots No Huddle. Steve Balestrieri, Mike Diabate, Derek Havens as your host. Alex Barth from 98.5. You can see his stuff there. Great coverage, great analysis. We hope you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Helps keep us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. And we will see you guys next week.